Welcome back to the studio. Today I'm going to be finishing up another one of the applique pieces that we've done here in the studio. This was Love is Love, and it's a kit that we have. It's all laser cut and pre-fused. The fusible product that we use in the manufacturing process is Steam 2, and I found a border for it. Normally, almost always when I do a border for a quilt, I always use something that's darker than the center, and in this case it was lighter. Very unusual for me, but I liked that this one had a lot of the same colors that the center had, and so even though it was lighter than the center, I went ahead and chose it. It does kind of pull out the lettering, which is also very light, and I just like the way it gave it a finish. So we have the border on there, and I was looking through the Pantos on Urban Elementz website, and what I chose is Whole Lot of Love. Again, I wanted to illustrate, because this question comes up all the time. People always ask if they have to always quilt something in this format, but we're going to be quilting today in this format. And so what we have to ask ourselves is the Panto directional, and is the directionality of it going to interfere with the final outcome of the quilt? And I'm going to pull the camera closer so you can see the pattern. Now, you're not going to be able to see the echo on this particular sheet today because my color ink is disappeared from my printer, but you will be able to see the primary. The design is directional, but you'll see that the directionality is not going to be altered in a negative way if we sew it vertical or horizontal. In fact, again, in my case, I'm actually going to like it in a way other than the way it was designed. More of the hearts to me are upright. And I should say that the reason I chose this particular Panto is because it has like echoing hearts that are spilling out in mostly all directions. So I'm going to pull this up close, and also I will say that I'm going to break away, and part of this video will be in the on the computer on my IQ stick, because I want you to be able to see really clearly that when I bring in the Panto on the IQ, there are two different places where we can flip X and Y on the design, and that is because when we bring in a Panto, we have to bring it in twice, once for the even and once for the odd rows. And the double X and Y option allows us to flip those rows individually or together. So I'm going to show you that on the IQ stick so you can see it clearly. But I'm going to go ahead out here and go ahead and just program the design on the computer without you having to see it real up close. But we'll edit that in. So I'm going to be using isocord thread the way I normally do. It's 40 weight. It's going to be isocord thread in the top and bobbin. And I'm using a scrap piece of 100% cotton batting again, but at least today the batting does extend all the way to the edge of the backing. I always like that when I can. That way when it rolls up, the edges of the backing don't get loose because there's no equal level in there of the batting. When the batting doesn't go all the way to the edge, there's nothing to keep it in tension the way there is in the middle of the quilt, and that sags. And that sagging helps decrease the amount of tension, equal tension across the whole quilt, and I don't like that. So I always like my batting to go all the way to the edge of the backing. I know it takes a little bit extra batting, but to me that's the cost of doing business or the cost of doing a quilt. Now the way around that is to keep strips of batting on hand that you could feed through on the sides of the quilt. In general, I keep the two sides 6 inches wider on each side because that's how much space I need between the needle and the edge of the throat plate, so it doesn't hit the side tensioning clamps on the machine. Knowing that, I could just keep 6-inch strips of batting on hand and use those to feed through the machine so I can keep equal tension on each side. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the camera in, and I'm going to show you what this design looks like. This is a really beautiful one. This was designed by Patricia Ritter in 2011. It's funny because I haven't seen this one before, but I wasn't necessarily looking for hearts, and that was my specific goal when I was picking this Panto. So we're going to get started, and we'll see how beautiful this stitches out. You can see that the Panto has 3 rows, but my color is very faint there. But this is what the Panto would look like going in that direction. This is the way it normally would be. But because I'm going to have the quilt going sideways, and then when we flip it, the outcome is going to be that the design is going to look this way. And I'm okay with that. But what I want to pay attention to, I'm going to pay attention to this part of the design here, because I don't want the Panto to be sewn this way, where it looks like this is sewing down. I do want these hearts to be going in the up direction. So there's 2 ways that I could do this. One of them is which way I load the quilt on the machine, and the other way is by using the X function on the IQ, which allows us to flip the entire Panto, which I'm going to be showing you in the software in a little bit. So I'll show you that. And again, I'm going to be using light teal colored isocord, and we'll go ahead and get this stitching out. Okay, I just wanted to show you that flipping on the x-axis. So we're going to go through the same process. We're going to design sew quilt, start new, reset. We're going to use a pantograph and enter the rectangle manually. The width was 48 inches wide and the height is 26. So we'll enter those and hit continue. And we have the visual representation here of our quilt top. We'll hit finished. We're going to go to our downloads and go to W for Whole Lot of Love. So we'll click that twice, once for the even rows and once for the odd rows. And here you'll see we have flip XY twice. And notice here that this echo of the heart is facing the right, and we're going to hit flip X, and now it's facing the left. So we're going to do the same thing here, and you'll notice that these are facing the right, and now they're facing the left. So you have this double XY, one for each of the rows. So now I'll touch gap, and this is just a continuation of what we did or will do outside. And then we'll touch the pattern height and bring that close to 9.5. And hit finished. And we're going to accept our transition type. We're going to do sew quilt, Panto sequencing, and our first row is this little tiny bit up here. We'll hit continue, Panto sequencing again so we could do the whole thing. And I like to alternate the rows, and I like to tie off in between. And we'll do the whole quilt. And you can see that the rows are a slightly different color green each row. So you can see 1, 2, 3 rows basically. So we could go ahead and hit sew quilt. And this is going to have us go to our constant speed just as a reminder. And this is just going to do a preview of what the sewing sequence would be. But you'll see more of this outside once we get the information loaded on the IQ. But that's what the XY axis is, and you have one for each of the 2 designs, the even and odd rows, and it's just a really cool feature on the IQ. Sometimes people ask why we have chosen to use the IQ on the Bernina. And I can tell you a couple things that we like about it. One of the things is there are no belts on the frame or on the carriage to drive the machine. There are two motors, an X motor and a Y motor, that are installed directly on the carriage, and it makes for a very accurate system. The other thing is all of the computer is right here on the head of the machine, so it's right here directly over the needle where you would be working. Also, the IntelliQuilter is very user friendly, and there are very few steps to get the design loaded on the machine, but it also has a great wealth of capability. I'm still learning all of the things that it can do, and I mostly do pantos, but it can do a wealth of custom work. So those are some of the things that we really like about it. One of the things that you always have to do when you turn it on, you always have to have it front and center, and that's just so it can get its bearings, and it can always go, I forget how many feet, I think it's 11 feet in each direction, but there's a certain measurement in each way, but you can get the most distance if you have it in the center. But when you're loading a design, you always have to have it in the upper left-hand corner. That way it knows where it is as far as the quilt is concerned. So I'm going to select Design Sew Quilt. Oh, and I haven't even gotten my measurement yet. I definitely need that. So I always add an inch on each side, so the actual measurement is 38, so I'll say 40. And so I'm going to start new, erase what I had working, and reset the clock. I'm going to work with a pantograph, and I'm going to enter the rectangle manually because it's larger than what the head of the machine can move, so I have to do that. So my width is going to be 40, and the width is always whatever this is, even though that's actually the length of the quilt. And the width of it is actually 24, but in this case we're going to call it the length, and so I'm going to say 26 because we're adding 2 inches. So now you'll see up at the top the visual representation of my rectangle is up here. So I'm going to hit finished, and now I'm going to go to my downloads, and what did we say? This was Whole Lotta Love, so I'm just going to go right to W, and here it is. We're going to bring that in twice, once for the even and once for the odd rows. And you'll see this on the computer in a little bit, but we have two XY, flip XY. And so, and again, I want it, the top of those hearts is what I'm going to be worried about. So I've just flipped both of those so that they're going towards the top, and this is the top here. So I've done that. I flipped both of the X. I don't have to do the Y. And now I can go ahead and touch my gap and nest those together a little bit better. I don't need them to touch. And my pattern height right now is 13.18. And I like printing these PDFs off because it tells you what the default print size is, or the default size of this Panto, which is 11.75. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that button, and I'm going to pay attention to that. But I can tell you that that may be a little bit larger than what I want for this small quilt. This is another one of the nice things about digital quilting, is that we can go ahead and decrease that a little bit more. So I have that at about 9.5 inches, and the pattern density is 1.41, so it's a little bit denser than it normally would have been, but I'm okay with that. Give it a nice even quilting. So I'm going to go ahead and hit finished. I have a continuous transition type. I'm going to hit accept and sew quilt. select the first pattern. I'm going to do panto sequencing. I like to alternate jump stitches. No. I just erased the whole sequence because I did jump stitches. I don't like jump stitches. So I'm going to select my first pattern again. Continue. Panto sequencing. I like to alternate, tie off, and do the whole quilt. And now the whole thing is done. And now I can hit sew. What's really cool about this particular design and this particular size quilt is that I'm going to be able to get 2 passes here without having to advance the quilt and realign. So that's pretty fun for me. This is the Whole Lot of Love. Is that right? Yep, I remembered. Whole Lot of Love. It only took 3 rows, so it went pretty quick. And this is a case of me being really happy with the outcome. The very light, I don't know what I'm going to call that. What did I call it earlier? Teal thread worked really good in both the lighter border and in the background. It almost disappears in both. It almost looks like invisible thread, which I like. And I'm really glad I decreased the size. I think you could probably see it better on the back. It's stitched out really beautifully, and I think the scale of it matches the scale of the applique perfectly. So this one to me is job well done. All I have to do is pick out a binding. What I've been doing a lot lately is using the binding, the same binding as the border, so they just kind of disappear. But because I chose a really light border, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try and find something in this background color of blue batik, or something, maybe something similar to the back, just so that it frames it in. Otherwise, I feel like it just bleeds out into nothing. So this is another one that's done and dusted. I'll be happy to see this one up. It's really cute and cheerful. I'm not sure where I'll put it. But I'm going to get the sleeve made for this and put that on, and then the binding, and take that over to my friend Marguerite. She's probably going to kill me because she's got 3 already, and I've got about 6 more to take to her. So she may not talk to me for a while after I give her all of these. But by the time I get them back, I'm going to have to redo the entire studio, change everything out. The next thing I want to do is, I keep talking about putting sleeves on here, so I'm going to do a short video on how I make sleeves and how I put them on. I learned this from one of my friends back in Miami, and I've used it ever since. I'm going to show you on the smallest possible quilt I can, because the technique is going to be the same, small or large, and that will require the least sewing possible for me to make the video shorter. So that'll be probably one of the next videos that I do, but this one's done. Thanks for joining me here in the studio today. I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Until then, take care of yourself and take care of each other. Look at that beautiful quilting.